My name is Sandy Purl, and I was the flight attendant on Southern Airways Flight 242 that crashed here in New Hope on April 4th, 1977, and I was 24 years old when that happened. Before that event, I'd been flying 4 years and 4 months, and I was just as carefree as anybody can imagine a 24-year-old. I'd been married a year at the time of the event. And I was on the third day of a 3-day trip, and it was on the 11th leg of a 13-leg day, which means we were scheduled to take off 13 times. And we were all exhausted. We've been flying in weather conditions that were not desirable. And I had started flying when I was in nursing school at Clayton Junior College in the south side of Atlanta. I used to call it UCLA, University of Clayton, Lower Atlanta, because I thought I was an uptown girl from Jonesboro, #1, getting to go to college, and the youngest girl of 8 children, and one going to college. Well, needless to say, I didn't have the money to continue college, and my goal was to be a nurse. And my English professor came by one day when I was taking my final English exam, and she put an ad from the newspaper that Southern Airways was hiring stewardesses. And I thought, well, I think I'll go by and apply. And I got hired. And the next thing you know, I was in the throngs of stewardess school. And we only had 2 airplanes with Southern Airways at that time, which was the Martin 404 that held 44 people, with a prop airplane, and a DC-9. Well, I flew the Martin 404 for the first month of flying, and I'll never forget my first DC-9 flight. And I thought, oh, Lord, here I am on big board. And I got up at 5 o'clock in the morning for an 8 o'clock show time, and you thought I was going to the Miss America pageant. Here I was so excited because it would hold 100 people. And I was so excited flying and flying and flying, and my life changed. I was raised in the Air Force, so here I was. You thought that I was a Pan Am flight attendant seeing the world, and all I was seeing was the Southeast, 13 takeoff and landings, up and down and up and down. But I loved my job, I loved people, and I loved serving. And back then we had service. We didn't have beverage carts. We worked our tailbones off. We were exhausted at the end of the day. We had minimum layovers of 9 hours and 45 minutes a night. We only had 9 days a month off, so we didn't have sense enough to know how hard we were working. And we would be on duty up to 16 hours a day. So our work rules were very different from what they are now. So we were exhausted.
Southern Airways Flight 242 was a DC-9 jet that executed a forced landing on a highway in New Hope after suffering hail damage and losing thrust on both engines in a severe thunderstorm on April 4th, 1977. At the time of the accident, the Southern Airways aircraft was flying from Huntsville, Alabama to Atlanta, Georgia. 63 people on the aircraft, including the flight crew, and 9 people on the ground died that day. 20 passengers survived, as well as 2 flight attendants. One passenger who initially survived died about a month later.
The best thing I can tell you right now is to just take a deep breath and to just breathe and to know that I am alive. And I'm here to tell you and stand before you that I am PTSD, post-traumatic stress syndrome, the same that we hear about with victims of war, victims of national disasters, victims that have gone through abuse, and victims that go through car accidents, and that I am one piece of 242. I am only one survivor, and I am a victim, and that everybody here has a story to tell, and everybody has something in their life that has been a turning point in their life, and 242 was a turning point in my life. And I became determined that if I was going to live with it, then I was going to do something with it. I was going to make a difference. And back then, there was nothing that offered psychological support systems for flight attendants. And I can promise you today, it is different in the airline industry, from the flight attendants to the in-flight services, from in-flight incidents, accidents, things that happen on overnights, things that happen in their personal lives. There are intervention programs for flight attendants. It's also happened to where the corporate liaisons that are assigned to families when there are accidents that are trained, and they go out in support teams of twos, and they are given debriefings on their daily assignments in working with families and assisting them with disasters. So there has been a difference, and there's been many people come together, but I have made it my mission to stand up and tell my story, to make a difference and lift the awareness, to soften it. If I can soften it for just one person, then I will walk through the fire again. So I stand before you as PTSD, and every day claiming my mission and my life of how I'm going to live with it. Life doesn't heal for me. Life affords me other life experiences to learn better how to live with it and cope with it. Every time I see a plane crash, I see my plane crash. Every time there's a disaster and I see pieces of people, I see pictures of carnage, I see my disaster. So PTSD is a real diagnosis, and it's something to live with every day and cope with. But I have a happy life. I have a good, strong support system in my family, in my friends, and in my community, and in a state of mind that I choose in my way of meditation. I live in East Tennessee in the mountains on 9.5 acres, and I have a creek. But every day I have to claim and make my mental state a way of meditation and calm. And I was married for 22 years. I raised a son. I have a 5-year-old granddaughter. So I do have a way of life, but I do have to tell you that it is as real to me today as if it happened yesterday. And coming back to New Hope and lifting the awareness to raise this memorial is no different than 9/11. We didn't crash into the Twin Towers, but we crashed into Newman's grocery store, and we crashed into this community. And we have to lift the awareness and remember every name on that survivor and that fatality list for the people that can't come back here and memorialize their loved ones. It's no different than driving down the road and seeing the flowers along the highway or along a country road where somebody, or the crosses, come back where their loved one was killed. It's up to us to do it. And I come back to New Hope, and I have to tell you, there is nothing abnormal about me. I never felt so normal than getting among the people that have had their lives touched and were there that day. I never felt so simple. I talked to Sam from the funeral home. I've talked to people that here today to have somebody who lost a person in their life on that plane crash, and members of their families, and to go to the cemetery and to know that I can't go to the back part where those children, still today, there's things that I can't do, where the children were buried. I can't do that to this day because it's too close to my heart, because I have a child. But I've met with the fathers. I've met with so many of the people and the board of directors that are keeping this memorialized, and it's a penny in the pot, the donation, to memorialize this, just like we do our Civil War heroes. Those cockpit crew members, they were friends of mine. They watched me grow from a young teenager when I started flying to becoming a young woman that was married at the time. They watched me grow up. And they have children that were 1 year old when their fathers were died, that are now in their 30s and 40s. And they've grown up without their fathers. And it's up to us to remember them for those families, the same as everybody else that died on that crash, to build this memorial and to remember this community that drives by it every day and keep it alive in the memory, in the right sense of mind. And we need young people to grow up and to remember the history of this. What happens when we pass on? And there's just the stone plaque up there. We need to remember this. This is something phenomenal that's happened in the history of the state of Georgia, and the phenomenal heroism I came back for a long time feeling like that I represented the worst thing that happened in these people's lives, and they didn't want to see me. But you know what it's like to be embraced and have them say, "How are you?" How healing that was to me. Because I was Southern Airways that came in. I was the missile. I was the bomb that devastated this community and made it happen to them and took those lives. I was not Sandy Purl, a victim for a long time, the guilt syndrome that I had done that. But I want you to know that there are things you can do to help people that go through that. The first thing you can do, y'all had tornadoes come through your community. And there are things you can do, and you're not going to see symptoms in people for a long time. They might not show up till 6 months later. You're going to have initially psychic numbing and euphoria that you survived, and then there's going to be guilt that you survived. Why did I survive? I didn't have any children. Why did they take those little children? I didn't have any children. Why didn't they mercifully take me to heaven? Why didn't they take me instead of those children? Why did they let me live? You know? Well, why not me? I had a lot of work to do, and I've done it. God had a plan for me, and I think I've done it, and I think I've done it well. And you get to those people, and you assure them you're going to be there for them, and allow them a shoulder to cry on. They've got to materialize these emotions. And what about the support system for the policemen? You want to know who the real heroes are to me? The policemen, firemen, paramedics, the nurses, the ambulance drivers, and the people in this community that rebuilt this community and that embrace me today and embrace each other. Those are the heroes. And the resilience of being able to recover from any kind of tragedy and strength and suffering and illness and to come back. The human character is amazing, what you are and what you have when you come back. And everybody suffers, but you got to have patience. We got to have patience in doing it. And remember what we are remembering. We're remembering these people, and we're lifting up and we're celebrating their lives. And we're celebrating what we've accomplished so far. But remember, it's a penny in the pot to help and to get donations to help remember this for those people that can't be here and the family members that can't be here. And I want to ask you if there's any kind of questions you want to ask me. There is nothing you can't ask me. Nothing you can't ask me, because it's in here. It might look okay on the outside, but there are invisible scars. I've often said if I'd lost an arm or a leg or something, had a little more than these few little scars up my shins, and I spent 2.5 years and, off and on back braces and injections, and I've had foot surgeries and stuff, but I was spared mercifully physically, and people said, "You're so lucky, go on with your life. You're so young, get over it," and all that. Well, I've done that. I wake up every day saying, "God, Lord, I woke up another morning, here I am. What you going to do with me today? What you got in store with me?" I do that, But, and mercifully, I praise, I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful that I wake up and I find something to do with my day and my life. And I've got great family and all that. But, if you could see the scars, it'd be just like walking out of a bomb shelter. And walking out of that just like it happened that day. The invisible scar, the invisible injury remains, and we've all got them. It's not a matter of playing dueling tragedies in life, because everybody's got them. But we've all got people to turn to if we just learn to. And knowing that you've got your experience to draw on, to know how to aid, and a lending hand and a lending heart and a comfort to somebody that's suffering. But thank you for coming out today. I hope that I've lifted the awareness of the history of what happened with that plane crash. And I want you to know that those people that were on that plane crash, none of them panicked. And they did have everything available to them before we hit that ground that I had been trained to give them. And I know one thing I can live with is I know that Kathy and that flight crew, we did our job. We did what we were trained to. We used every tool within our brain and our training skills. When you're under stress, you hit a button on the computer. And for a long time, I thought, what did I not do? What could I have done? Well, we know why anybody survived that miracle. Everybody that came out of that was a miracle. And I didn't save anybody. But I'm going to tell you, I did my job, and that I can live with. So your job is to help us live with what our responsibility is. And that is to memorialize them and to help us get that done and to never forget it, because this is our 911. And we know what it was when that 911 button was hit here in Paulding County. And thank you for coming out. And let's not forget, and let's celebrate the human spirit, or the character, the resilience, and the human nature of loving and moving on and moving forward. But thank you for having me. I was off the airline from the accident for 4 years, but I returned after 4 years, and I flew another 16 years. Yes, I did. And the reason I decided to go back flying was I didn't know if I would fly one day, 1 minute. I didn't know if I'd be able to go out and go up that ramp on that airplane. But I knew I was ready to make a decision about the rest of my life. And if I wasn't going to fly, I wasn't going to fly because I chose not to, and not because something bad happened to me. Like I said before, if I was going to be doing dilly bars at the Dairy Queen, I was going to be doing the prettiest little dilly bars that you ever did see. And I was going to be the cutest little girl in the apron. But I knew I was going to make that decision in my life, that it was time to be done with it.